a special edition. We're in Melbourne this week for CyberCon 2023. So we're doing a bit of a in-house, on-the-road podcast episode, and we've invited along some of the amazing speakers that are going to be speaking at CyberCon. And right now in the studio with me is Susie Jones, and she's the CEO and founder of Cynch Security. So Susie, I want to welcome you to the studio and to lovely Melbourne. You're a local here, so I feel like I'm the guest in a way this morning.
Apologies for the weather that we're providing this week, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, I definitely didn't bring the Perth weather with me. I came from very sunny beach weather into some slightly miserable sort of weather here.
Yeah, we're really putting it on this week, that's for sure.
yeah, but it's been good otherwise. I've this is I think now my third time in Melbourne. I just I've fallen in love with Melbourne. Really love the city, and it's good to be back. I'm really excited for this conference. But yeah, it's enough about me. I want to talk about you, which is why you're here. And for those of you who may not know you, Susie, can you sort of tell us a bit about yourself as far as your background and what you actually do at Cynch Security?
Yeah, thanks. So Cynch was started by myself and my co-founder, Adam Selwood, back in 2018. In fact, yesterday I celebrated working on Cynch for 5 years full-time.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. That's a huge milestone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As we say, we've been plugging away at Cynch for 2.5 years plus a pandemic. So
probably adds another decade or two.
Yeah, that's right. But my background, I actually spent the first 10 years of my career as a corporate insurance broker. So I've always worked in risk management. But once I transitioned out of being a broker, I went across to Australia Post and very quickly broadened out my expertise and my remit to risk management, commercial risk management, digital risk management, and cyber risk management. And so I actually met my co-founder, Adam, at Australia Post. We spent 6 months working on a project there internally that was meant to be designing a small business digital product to help small business owners who had suffered from a data breach. So I was coming across with my insurance and risk management background. He's the technologist and the security architect. And we spent 6 months listening to small business owners who had suffered data breaches and hearing their stories of the emotional distress that had put them under was really quite extraordinary. Working at a big company like Australia Post, when you have a cyber incident, it makes for a pretty bad day. It can make for a bad week or a bad month, but you move on. You get past it, you move on. For a small business owner, the fact that they own that business is so much part of their identity as a human that it is absolutely devastating, let alone the financial devastation. So once we successfully helped Australia Post realise that they don't want to be a security company and the project got shut down, we were determined to make a difference because we recognised that small businesses were being completely ignored by the cybersecurity industry. We wanted to change that. So we built Cynch, and it's all about addressing the fact that small business owners have small budgets, they have no time, but most importantly, they don't speak cyber. They don't understand the expert advice that's out there because it's all written for cybersecurity experts. So we built a solution that helps them as a small business company to understand and improve and measure their risk. But then alternatively, we also have a second platform for large enterprises that have small businesses in their supply chain that helps them to see in aggregate what actually is the cyber maturity of their supply chain. Because if they can't use these enterprise grade tools, then you as an enterprise can't actually understand what the posture is of your supply chain. So we're doing some pretty cool alternative stuff.
Yeah, okay, because you've got a SaaS approach, and do you find that was chosen or selected and you went down that route because you're dealing with small businesses, and like you were saying, there's that level of they don't have that understanding that it has been designed for larger enterprises where there are cybersecurity experts within the organization to address that. Is that why you went down that road?
Well, there were several reasons why we built it as SaaS. First of all, my co-founder, Adam, he started his technology career in infrastructure and he didn't want a server. So it was always going to be cloud-based and SaaS-based. But also, we have the mission to set out and help hundreds of thousands, millions of small businesses across the globe. So you can't do it at scale unless it is SaaS. Also, when you understand small businesses generally, particularly here in Australia, but it's pretty similar trends overseas. Small businesses, and when I talk small businesses, I'm talking businesses with fewer than 20 staff.
Yeah.
They've already gone through cloud adoption long ago. Enterprises have been struggling with that shift for years because of budgets and all sorts of other things. But small businesses are already 80-90% cloud. We did a study back in 2020 that showed that 80% of the technologies being used by small businesses was cloud-based. So they're not afraid of SaaS. And so for us, it makes it infinitely scalable and affordable. It's fairly bloody cheap to set up a SaaS company these days and to run it efficiently. But it means that we were able to set out and build it secure by design right from the start. So not only can we have confidence that our company is secure, but then we can focus on helping our customers get secure.
Yeah, fantastic. And so you're like we mentioned at the head of the show, you're speaking at CyberCon, and you're going to be talking about it's listed down as enterprise assurance processes, correct?
It's about cybersecurity supply chain assurance. And the way that the standard practices right across the industry are completely impractical when you have small businesses in your supply chain. And it's for those reasons that I said at the start. They don't have the time, they don't have the budget, and they don't speak cyber. So all of the supply chain assurance solutions and practices and best practice advice out there on how to run an assurance program within a large enterprise comes completely unstuck when you have hundreds, thousands of small businesses in your supply chain. So we've just wrapped up a pilot and just signed on a very large telecommunications company as a customer for our supply chain solution. And the problem statement that they came to us was twofold. So first of all, they had hundreds of small business critical suppliers in their supply chain. So these are guys climbing poles in the middle of Northern Territory. There is only one company out there that can do it. So if the security is not good, you can't just say, well, rip up the contract and move to somebody else, because they're the only ones that do it. And there are hundreds of businesses like that in Australia that they have critical suppliers that they must use. However, the solution that they used internally, the product that they used, was written by cybersecurity experts for cybersecurity experts. One of the pilot participants, one of the small businesses that we went through the pilot with, said that they had already spent 175 hours trying to respond and go through this questionnaire assessment process of this enterprise grade solution, and they still came out with a score of 0. Now, that wasn't because they didn't have any security in place. It was because, frankly, the bullshit approach of these solutions that are written for security experts. And they came to us. We were able to show them within a week, actually, we can already demonstrate that, 20% of the controls that is recommended are in place, and we have evidence for it. And by the end of the pilot, they were passing with flying colours. So now that large enterprise customers have 2 pathways. They can either, if the supplier comes through and they are mature companies, they actually have cyber experts on their team, then they can go down the traditional route. I still don't think you want to, because we still have to do that and it's not fun. But, that's one way. But when they have these small business suppliers coming through, they now get rerouted off to us. And they go through our assessment because we speak like a human. We don't do tech speak. We remove all the noise because we only ask them about controls that are relevant to the tech that they actually have. Whereas the traditional approach in cyber security assurance is to ask, do you have these controls anywhere? And if you don't have a technology that control applies to, you don't necessarily even understand what it's asking.
Right.
As a small business owner, when you're completing these, actually as anybody, when you're completing these questionnaires, there's this hesitance to say no, because it's a hesitance to say not applicable, because you're but maybe it's buried in the back somewhere and I don't know
You're just
about
not
it,
sure about it, yeah.
And so people say no when they're not sure, when in actual fact they could just say yes because it's not applicable anyway. So it's a big part of this cultural shift as well, as everybody wants to get things right. And when it comes to security, there's no right or wrong. There's just keep moving and keep progressing and keep getting better.
Yeah, so you sort of see it as like a broader like industry, almost like a cultural thing in the industry as well. And do you see that shifting? Is that happening?
Absolutely. So when we first set out with Cynch, within supplier assurance professionals, it was still very much the perspective that, well, they're our suppliers. Like we are their customers.
Yeah.
They just have to do it. Like I don't care how they do it. They just have to meet our requirements. That's it. And over the last few years, particularly through all of the various supply chain issues that we all experienced throughout the pandemic, they've realised that actually we're all in this together, and flipping that mindset from, thou must do this to, you know what, we're big, we're resourced, let me help you do this. That means you can flip the whole process on its head. So, we're actually selling to large enterprises. And yet the benefit of our product is actually being given to small businesses so that they can not only measure and demonstrate how good their security is, but they have a mechanism to improve it. And it's not a point-in-time assessment. It's done each and every day of the year.
Yeah, okay. And I sort of want to talk on the technology side of things because, like, even throughout your career, like, there's been a lot of evolution as far as the technology available. Where do you see it? I guess what changes have you seen, and where do you see it going in the future, especially pertaining to especially the technology applicable to the small business community?
Yeah, certainly in the early days of Cynch, small businesses were still going through that digital adoption. And just like everybody else, but they were forced to change when the pandemic hit and we all got sent home, right?
Yeah.
Even for us as a company, we were still all working out of an office. Sure, it was an office in a co-working space. But I remember I think it was like the 17th of March, 2020. We just packed up our laptops, went home, opened up on Monday morning, and away we went. So we were ready, but so many businesses weren't. So certainly throughout 2020, that digital adoption got fast-tracked. And so that year and even 2021, the focus was really around, okay, what have we got now? We've had to make some rapid decisions. We've made some messy decisions just to be able to keep going, and adopted technologies that aren't really fit for purpose. And what we've seen last year and this year is a heightened focus on improving business efficiencies, because so many businesses, they had subscriptions to all sorts of things that they didn't need. They had subscriptions to things that, like I say, weren't fit for purpose. So people have taken a breath and are really looking at, okay, what is it that I actually want and how do I get that in place? And so that's been quite beneficial for us, because that for those that are aware that cyber risk is a thing that they should be thinking about, that's when they sit back and go, well, hold on. Does this actually make sense now?
Yeah.
What do I need to change? Is there a better solution? Is there a more secure solution? Is there, a cheaper solution that can give me the same for less? So those sort of decisions are the best decisions that our team love, helping people to come to when they need to.
Yeah, fantastic. And like a big thing, especially for small businesses, and like this, a lot of our listenership is from small businesses. What are, I guess, the key things you'd suggest that, because, a lot of times it's the user practices that have implications around cybersecurity. I guess, like, being a professional, what would you say are, like, the key things that people should be looking out for in their own practices?
Yeah, look, the first and foremost is understand what you have. So many businesses, particularly when they have had to rapidly adopt cloud solutions to be able to continue their business, they will still have old servers, old file storage, probably old backup drives, all sorts of things sitting around with really critical information, which if they got lost or destroyed, could, have really wide-ranging damaging effects on your business. So first of all, take stock of what you have and where you have it, and also how you got it. Many businesses think, okay, I store everything in Google Drive, so that's okay. I know how I'm storing that, etc. But they forget that they got it maybe through a Dropbox link, because that was how it got to them in the first place, and they haven't actually done anything to secure their Dropbox. Perhaps it was something that was just sent unencrypted in email, and still that's just sitting there in their inbox. So there's a lot of ways that things are transmitted that you need to think about as well. The next thing I suggest is truly thinking about who has access to that information. Do they need that access? Has that changed over time? And really thinking about who should be able to access this information and how can they do it. So, for example, you might have, a practice manager in a law firm or something like that. They go away on holidays for a month. Somebody else steps up into that role. So, during that time, you grant them, higher privileges, access, etc., that they wouldn't usually have. The person comes back from leave, but those additional higher credentials have never been removed. So that person that played backup for that month still has access to all these systems that they shouldn't have. So really, actually consciously sitting down and going, who has access to what and should they still have that access, and putting in processes so that when somebody is on leave and you need to elevate privileges, you actually go back and de-escalate them. And look, I can go on and on about this, but multi-factor authentication is just so critical. In this day and age where people are still using terrible passwords, they're using the same password across everything, they've got them, saved in a Google Sheet so that their whole team can access it, or whatever bad password management practices are in place, and I don't think there is any business, except for perhaps ours, that has it right. You should make sure that you have multi-factor authentication in place everywhere, because then even if your crappy password is compromised, then they still can't get into whatever account they're trying to get into without that second form of authentication. So just if you're not going to do the right thing by your passwords, at least make sure you've got MFA enabled.
Okay, I think that'll be the biggest takeaway besides that. That's a good one. I want to talk a bit more about yourself, Susie, as far as you as the being a founder and a business owner as well. So you're celebrating 5 years, which is awesome. Again, congratulations. My first question would be I guess what's been the if you've had any I guess the biggest challenge you've been able to overcome over that 5 years with yourself and your co-founder as well.
Look, at being an early stage startup founder through a pandemic is been pretty unique and pretty challenging. So I think one of the best things that Adam and I did at the start of Cynch that really has held us in good stead throughout the challenging times was we sat down and really we're consciously thinking about, as individuals, as people, what are the values that we hold true? So we actually did, a values test and did them individually and came together and discussed the results. And we built Cynch based on the 3 values where we overlapped. And that has been really critical to our success, both as a founding team, but also as a company, because it's something that you can rally everybody together. So, we had dark times in pandemic where, sales completely dried up, all interest dried up, that we just raised a funding round and we couldn't do any of the things that we were planning on doing with that funding. But the fact that we had those values in place and the team understood, what we stood for, really got us through.
Yeah, and just on that, I suppose how do you, because that's a really important feature, of course, being able to communicate those values to, knowing them, but then communicating them to your team as well. How did you go about doing that, and how did you, I guess, have the team aligned with those values and continue to keep them aligned with that?
Yeah, a few different ways. So, first of all, in every position description job ad that we put out there, we have those 3 values actually outlined in it. We have a statement about what Cynch is here to do, what our mission is. We have our values out there. We have an inclusivity statement that we very much hold true. And all of that comes before any description of what the job is. So even when somebody applies for a job at Cynch, they already have an understanding of, what our business stands for and who we are and etc. And then throughout the recruitment process, obviously discussing and really trying to get to the bottom about for anybody that's applying for that role, what are the values that they hold true and do they align with ours? And sticking to it. So Adam and I, every week there would be a day where we spoke about one of the values. So whether it be because a decision needs to be made and we're not quite sure what's going to be right, it's like, well, hold on, which one best aligns to what we're here to do? So you just have to live it and breathe it and demonstrate it and talk about it. As can be seen by me being on a podcast, I will happily talk to anybody about most things. So for me, that comes easier as it might for others. But yeah, you just got to you got to hold true to yourself. Being a startup founder, being a small business owner, it's not easy. It's just not. There are so many challenges that when you have a corporate career like what I'd had before, I had zero appreciation of. And so making sure that you truly understand what are you in this for really helps you get through those darker times.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And like, I suppose, if you were speaking to someone who was on like the beginning of that journey, 5 years ago, and you're not having that, I guess, knowledge of what you do have to go through, I guess, what would you say to that person? I suppose suggest, recommend.
Yeah. First of all, know who your circle is. In terms of your family and friends, know who are the people that get it and are going to be your champion and are going to be your sounding board. Particularly those that are starting a startup rather than a small business. It's different. It's fundamentally different trying to build a high growth company that is going to seismically change something in the world. That is completely different, and the pressure that you put yourself under is completely different to starting a small business. It's not to say that one is bigger or lesser than the other. It's just different. And when you don't have a circle of friends or background in startups like I didn't have, it meant that so many of my usual, coaching friends, whoever it might be, who I would call on when, I needed a sounding board, they simply didn't understand where I was coming from. So really having those few people around me that understood what I was going through, could recommend people that I could reach out to and get ideas from, etc., was really critical for me in the first instance. I said to Adam in the first place, I want to do this. I want to quit Australia Post and work on this full time now, but I need people around me. And he wasn't in a position to just quit his job like what I was doing at the time. So I joined the SciRise Accelerator, which is now shut down, which is a huge shame, but it was Australia's only cybersecurity accelerator. And being surrounded by 5 other startups that were at the same stage as we were, the actual team at SciRise, Scott Hansacker and Kirsten McIntosh, having people around, let alone all of the different mentors that they had involved in that program, really helped me transition from that corporate mindset to a founder mindset, as well as meant that those challenging times, I had people around me that had been through it before.
Yeah, and you could bounce off them and like they'll know, oh, don't worry, like this is okay.
Yeah, exactly. Don't worry, everybody goes through that stuff. Don't listen to them. It doesn't matter. Move on.
Yeah, great. And that being said, I suppose over that time, is there like a particular highlight you can think of that really sticks out in your memory that you recall?
It's pretty pertinent right now, given what's going on in the world. But very early in the SciRise program that we went through, we actually did spend a week in Israel and in Tel Aviv, and met some of the most beautiful humans I'd ever met in my life. So it's heartbreaking to see what is happening in over there at the moment on both sides. I don't take a particular side. It's just heartbreaking to see the pain that is being caused. But that trip in particular, Israel I don't know if it still is, but was known as the startup capital of the world because, if here in Australia, if you started your own business before 21, they thought you were crazy. In Tel Aviv, if you hit 21 and still hadn't started your own business, what are you doing with your life? So it's a completely different mind shift, and that trip really opened my eyes to the potential size of the opportunity that we were building in front of us.
Yeah, wow. Okay, and that would have been like quite early on, like in the...
Yeah, it was month 2, I think it was. Yeah. We started the program in October, and I think it was the end of November that we were in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, wow. Okay, that's an incredible experience. And one thing I always like to ask my guests when they come on is, I guess, how do you continue learning as far as like from like a personal point of view to, especially being like in that startup mindset, it's very different. Are there any like books that you recommend or sort of resources that you use to improve yourself? Yeah,
in the early days, one of the most beneficial books that I read just to help put me in the founder mindset was The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. And he was, he's built some just gigantic businesses and has been investing, etc. So he knows what he's talking about, but he really puts it into the founders' eyes of what they need to do. So that was really, really helpful for me to understand some of the advice and rhetoric that's out there in startup land and what it actually means from a founder perspective, but also helped to challenge some of the assumptions that I had made along the way as well. So that definitely recommended.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I was reading a recent article about yourself. I believe it was Women in Digital that it was about, and I wanted to ask you a bit about that because something I've like coming into the cybersecurity industry that I've noticed is that there is such diversity there on lots of different fronts, but and one of the things you were talking about is the I suppose growth of women entering the cybersecurity industry. I just want to ask you a bit more about that because are you seeing a shift and a trajectory of more women in the cybersecurity space?
I've certainly seen more women entering cybersecurity. It's hard to say, particularly when you're faced with the statistics, that there are as many women staying in the industry as there are men.
Okay.
There are many cultural challenges with that. It can be very hard working in a high pressure role in cybersecurity whilst raising a young family, etc. So, there are some really obvious challenges along the way. But the one thing I say, and I usually don't comment on me being a woman or anything like that, my gender's irrelevant. But one thing I will say is that working in cybersecurity for the last 7-8 years, whatever it's been now, I have faced far less sexism, chauvinistic behaviour, appalling behaviour in this industry than what I did in all of the years in insurance broking and risk management beforehand. I actually didn't realise how poor the behaviour was that I had experienced in those industries because they were just normalised.
Wow. Okay.
Until I was out of it and in security. And I'm like, oh, this is actually how women are meant to be treated.
Right.
So whilst I know that that's not the experience that everybody has, I would say that the industry overall is far more open-eyed about its gender and diversity challenges that it has, and there are people doing a lot of things to change it and overcome it, that I hold out hope that, perhaps I am in the last generation where it is so sizably different.
Yeah, great. No, I mean, so that sounds awesome, and it's interesting to sort of hear that distinction between, I guess, a corporate background, and moving into the industry as well. There was something else in that article which I think it was the last thing you said. You said something. How do you waste time on the internet or something? And it was I think you said watching movie trailers. Are you a big movie fan, Susie? Or just the trailers?
Well, it's funny. I hardly ever get to watch movies now, but growing up, I was obsessed with movies. So,
okay.
One of my high school jobs, I was assistant manager of a Blockbuster video store back when that was a thing.
Okay.
I had a collection of hundreds and hundreds of videos, and then by the end, I had a collection of thousands of DVDs, which of course now have been scrapped because I stream everything. But
collecting dust on the bookshelf.
Exactly. So in the past, I had a podcast up until a couple of years ago with a close friend of mine, where all we did was each week is we would watch a movie from our childhood from the 80s.
Oh, I don't know. What was it called?
Oh God, I can't even remember. What was it? I can't remember. I'll have to let you know, and you can put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But we watched a movie from our childhood and then got together on a podcast and just spoke about it.
Oh,
so,
God.
We reviewed. We did reviews of things like the Care Bears movie. That was not my selection. That was Travis's selection. We watched The Crow. All sorts of movies that from 80s and 90s just really shaped who we are as people.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun doing that podcast, but we were doing it in lockdown, and then things opened up again, and we didn't have any time. But so movies have always been a big part of my life.
Yeah, without this becoming that podcast for the rest of it, just quickly, what is I suppose a movie that you cherish from your childhood?
Oh, The Princess Bride.
Oh, well, yeah.
Absolutely. And in fact, myself and my best friend were fortunate enough to meet Carrie Elwes a couple of months ago. There was a screening over at the convention centre of the movie with the symphony orchestra playing the music, and Kerry was there. He came out and spoke beforehand.
Oh, was that with the MSO?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So he came out and spoke beforehand on stage, and then if you'd spent the exorbitant money to meet him in person, you got to meet him in person. So I will cherish that for the rest of my days, because I have loved that man since I was 5 years old.
That's fantastic, yeah. Oh, God. That sounds like an awesome experience as well.
It was.
We are coming to the end of the episode, Susie, but is there anything, how can people find out more about yourself and and Cynch Security as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So check out our website, which is cynch, cynch.com.au. I'm one of the most easily discoverable cyber CEOs out there, so you can hit me up on LinkedIn, Susie Cynch. But otherwise, just reach out, hello@cynch.com.au. All of our team have access to that inbox, and I'll happily have a chat.
Fantastic. Susie, I really want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been an awesome conversation. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you at CyberCon. We'll see you and the team there.
Absolutely. Thank you.